Hello, all. It is Wednesday, my dudes.
It's Wednesday. Hello, Ryuvi.
Hello, Wraith. And hello, everybody else.
But yeah, as I was saying, welcome to the workshop. It's Wednesday. I didn't have my microphone unmuted at the start, like an absolute dunce again.
Ah,
I have to learn to scroll. So, let's see, who do we have here today? We have Danny, Strange Dragon, Ramper, Grey Wolf Max, and Caillou. Hello,
Caillou
everyone.
Volpez. Hello.
Hello to you. So yes, today we are covering slots and users, which can be, quite a lot of stuff. There is quite a sufficient amount of logics for slots, and there's quite a lot of different ways to work with users and stuff. So Ravy and Aegis are going to be covering that one. Apologies, by the way, for not being on last week. Quite a few bits were going on. I'd just come back from a convention, so I was still extremely tired and I was unwell. And then, as I say, other things and stuff.
Life.
Yeah, and Ryuvi's going into hiding as of tonight.
I'm just space turkey, not an earth turkey.
Do they have Thanksgiving on Rygia?
Good question. I'm not a part of it if they do.
Technically, wouldn't that be cannibalism anyway?
Space Thanksgiving.
Space Thanksgiving, yes.
Space giving.
Space giving. But yeah, so as I say, given it'll probably be mostly down to you today, Ryuv.
Yep.
You will have the camera. I'm going to put you on broadcast. Put Aegis on
Alright.
broadcast. And
In
let
your head.
me... No, I don't want to hide the camera. I want to set the audio from camera viewpoint, and I want to give Ryuv the camera.
Alrighty.
There we go.
Well, starting off, we are going to cover today two folders in the Logix Node browser, specifically the slots and users folders. If you're on the default one, they're over here. And inside these two folders are nodes that pertain to getting, setting, and changing attributes and all sorts of different things of slots, which a slot is a container of sorts, and users allows you to get information about, as well as events from users, be that when a user joins a world, or maybe you want a user's frame rate, or you want to get, their ping so you can tell if they're having a connection problem, all sorts of different things like that. Whereas the subfolder, the two subfolders in the users folder allow you to do things in regards to the user's view position, where they're hearing the world from, as well as getting information about different parts of the user, like their head, their hands, hips, etc. But starting off, let's look at the nodes that the slots folder has. There's a few categories of nodes. We have our they're not necessarily getters, but they get various information from slots and allow you to, given a slot, or a component for that one singular node, it gets you information about it. For instance, you can get how many children a slot has. You can get the active user of a slot, which, if you don't know, the active user of a slot is the user that slot is parented to. As an example, if I open myself here in the inspector and I just add a slot somewhere here, let's call this if I take this slot and get the active user of it, then I'm the active user, because it is parented to me. every single slot underneath a user has that user as the active user. This is useful for example, say you have a some kind of an equipped item. Then that equipped item's active user will be the user who has it equipped, for example. But we can remove this and move on. There is a difference between active user and active user root, but we will touch on that a little bit later. Beyond the get nodes, we have our various impulse-based nodes, and these allow you to, for instance, set that slot's child index, set if it is active or not, set its name, order offset, everything that pertains to a slot, which if I grab a slot over here, we can see that these getter and setters refer mainly to what's here, the actual slot attributes at the top of the inspector when you look at a slot, like its active state, its persistence state, the order offset, its name, its tag, etc. We also are able to get these items from a slot directly outside of just, say, getting them from the interface card.
To kind of go over again, if anyone isn't familiar with what does it mean a slot is persistent or not. If you look in the inspector, usually the slots that are marked non-persistent are orange. For example,
like users.
Us. And the reason why it's marked non-persistent, what it does, every time you save the world, it will not be saved. It'll basically take everything in the world, save that world state, but ignore everything that's non-persistent.
And
Same when
consequently, if you see slots in the hierarchy that are red, that means they are located underneath a non-persistent slot.
Yes. And as well as it's the same thing when you save an object. If you have something under that object that is non-persistent, it will not save.
And
Even some
anything under
components.
it.
Components also have that feature too.
Good for transient, temporary things.
Yes.
We do have a question from Caio Volpes. So get active user would be best for local world settings, right? Yes, to a degree. It really depends on how you want to approach that. Getting the active user would get the user who essentially, let's say, quote unquote, owns that slot. So, for instance, my tool here, when I grab it, I'm the active user because it's parented to me when I grab something. But if I let go, I'm no longer the active user, and in this case, it doesn't have an active user because no user is interacting with it. Let's see.
Also,
Moving on, though.
say get there's a couple other examples of getting like specific users and like different things. For example, there's for anchors, there's also specific nodes for that to get a user in an anchor. But another good way of getting users as well is simply either looking at the user list or by use. Well, as Ravi will go over what the rest of the nodes, I realized you haven't gotten over those yet, so I'll save that for later. But yeah.
Next up on the slots nodes, we have 4 nodes which pertain to getting a node from another node. In this case, we want to find a child node by name or find a parent node by name or tag. And what this does is, given a slot and a name and some other parameters like if you want to detect capital letters or not, or if you want to choose how deep you want to search, you can find a node. Or not a node, a slot, apologies, which we have an example for later. Same thing if you need to find a slot that is above another one, you can use the find parent by name and by tag nodes, effectively. Next, we have nodes which allow you to either destroy or create new and or duplicate slots. We can destroy a slot, We can destroy the children of a slot, and we can duplicate a slot. This node is functionally equivalent to this button on the inspector with a slot selected. It will duplicate something. It's also exactly the same as the duplicate button on your context menu. There is one node in here, which is two nodes that are kind of in their own categories, and we have the root slot node, which gives you one slot and only one slot, specifically that one, the root. This is useful for lots of things. Dynamic impulses, a slot that you can guarantee that will exist, and etc. We also have slot children events, which, given a slot and a firing user, if any, you can detect if that slot has gained or lost a child. This is useful if you're wanting to keep track of what things or how many things are located underneath a hierarchy, or getting a user list to a degree. But we will cover that a little bit later.
There is a component that is very similar to that, and that is the parent-child audio clip player as well. What it does is it's kind of self-explanatory. It plays an audio clip every time you add a child or remove a child under a parent object. And I can show that too.
Yes.
Later.
Absolutely. Now, before we go into examples, we're going to move on to the users nodes, which there are quite a few more. But starting off, we have our nodes which get you some user or some slot relative to a user. Like before, we can get the active user root user, which is a complicated name for a node, which given a user root, it gives you a user. We can get the host user of a world, which the host user of a world is the user that is currently hosting it, the user that created that session. We also have the local user, which relative to everyone is yourself. So if I were to look at the output of the local user node, it would be me. But if you were to look at the output of the local user node, it would be you. This is great if you need something to be specific for each and every user. You can just use the local user. Similarly, we have the local user root node, which gives you the user root, which the difference between the user and user root is that the user is the whole user, and the user root allows you to get information like skeleton information, avatar information, head position, view position, and other things like that. We also have a couple of other local nodes, like the local user slot and the local user space. These do have a difference, and we'll be demonstrating that a little bit differently, or a little bit later. Apologies. We also have user root slot and user root, which, given a user, will either get you their user root slot or their user root. Next, we have all of the nodes that deal with getting a Boolean value from a user. Namely things like, is the user the local user? Meaning, is this user that we're providing into it you? We also have nodes to tell if the user has their dashboard or platform dashboard open, which we'll be covering a little later. We also have a bunch of other nodes to detect various aspects of a user, like are they in edit mode, are they in kiosk mode, are they a patron, are they present in the headset, in the world, and etc. There's a lot of handy nodes there for detecting various Boolean aspects of a user. And next we have the non-Boolean aspects of a user that you can get from a user, namely things like their download speed, their upload speed, their frame rate, ping, user ID, username, and a bunch of other things given a user, including things like their primary hand. So if you're developing something that you want to be used ambidextrous, essentially, you can get their primary hand if you need to, left or right. Let's see, we do have a question from Caio Volpes again. I assume it's impossible to delete the root node through logics. Yes, you can try, but you're not going to be able to, because that's just modifying the root node in essentially any way is blocked, because You want to destroy the world? Then just close the world. Anyhow, next, we have nodes which allow you to get a user from a string. In this case, if you want to get a user from their ID or from their username, you can do that. Well, actually using this in an example we'll see in a minute. And finally, in the main folder of the users, we have nodes which give you events based on 3 criteria, whether a user joined, a user left, or a user spawned. Now, you might think that the user spawned and user joined nodes are exactly the same, but they have a difference, and we will also be covering that shortly. Next, in the first subfolder of users, we have the local output folder, which this gives us just a handful of nodes, which allow us to get the actual position that the user uses for their view, their ears, and whether or not their ears and view are overridden from where their headset's actual view and ears positions are located. And if you're in desktop, you can get your desktop. I believe that might be diagonal or horizontal, I'm not entirely sure, but that is your desktop field of view. This is useful for, say you have a desktop user and they are currently in the freeform camera, then this view position will give you the actual position that they're viewing the world in from, regardless if they're viewing in first person, third person, free roaming with their camera, etc. That will always return where they're viewing the world from. Now, moving on.
Interesting that you can get the FOV.
That was added for some reason, but it's useful. Next up, we have the handful of nodes from the user root subfolder of the users folder. And here we have a few categories, which they all are essentially the same thing, but for different aspects of the user. We have, given a user root and a side, it will get you that controller side, be there left or right. You can do the same thing for the hand, which the difference between these is the controller slot is based off of your actual controller's position and such, whereas the hand slot is your avatar's hands slot most of the time. We also have the head slot, if you want to get that. Let's see. Now, the next of these nodes pertain to different aspects of the user, like the feet position and rotation, head facing direction, head position, hips position, left and right hand position and rotation, and as well as nodes that allow you to set these values. An example of this would be, say you want to set a user's position to another position, say for a teleporter. If you just set the position of their slot directly, well, they might not be standing in the middle of their VR space, so they'll be offset from that position. Whereas if you set their feet position, that puts exactly where their feet are, where you want them to go. And it's useful for teleporting and other things. Let's see, we do have a couple of questions while we're at it. Or one question, I should say, from Emerald Sundisk. Wait, is this the kind of stuff you'd need to make a two-handed weapon?
Depends on the approach.
It does depend on the approach. The simple approach would not necessarily to use these nodes. More so, it would be for using things like
I'm getting an example. Give me a sec.
yes, actually, an example would be great. But
There.
where did you just delete it?
This is using a slider and a look at,
There we go.
and this is purely a component solution.
Yep. So,
Basically, there's an invisible collider there that I grab, or slider actually, and it just has the whole root of the weapon face it.
yep, and that's what the look at is for, because it's the origin of the weapon is where your other hand is. So when it looks at the other point, it naturally follows wherever your hands go.
Another method I've seen that I've experimented as well too, I just don't have the example right now, but it's still using the look at, but instead of a simple slider, you use a dynamic bone chain. It's invisible.
Hmm.
And it has like different chains along it, and it also utilizes the grab slipping for it as you go.
It's quite clever, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Back to our nodes, however. There are just a couple of other nodes here which don't necessarily pertain to a position or rotation of something, but more so your actual user scale. These two nodes here allow you to get and set a user's scale, because, of course, you can scale yourself up and down at any time. This allows you to do that through logics, including allow you to scale yourself over a set amount of time, which is exactly like if you scale yourself to a certain size and scale back up. You'll notice it's not an immediate scale transformation. It happens over time. You can do the same thing with this node. But overall, these are the nodes in the slots and users folders. There's quite a lot. Once again, they are located here in the node menu. And next, we're going to cover just a few examples of some potentially confusing nodes. First one is the destroy slot node. Well, what does it do? It destroys a slot. Given a slot, it will destroy it. You can also choose, do you want to preserve the assets on this slot or not? And do you want it to send a destroying event in case it has logics on itself that does something whenever it gets destroyed? In this case, we're going to literally be destroying itself. So when I pulse this, the node destroys itself. Great. Next, we have the root slot. Well, what is that? Well, it's the root. The root also doesn't have a parent. You can get to the root at any time by getting your dev tip out and clicking Open Inspector with nothing selected. There's your root, right at the top. I don't recommend selecting it because it's a very heavy node, or very heavy slot with lots of components on it. There's no real reason for you to be interacting with the root like that. But it's useful for all sorts of logics things. Next, we have talking about slot children events. And what we have here is I have a box and a sphere. And when I take the sphere and parent it to the box, I get it right. Let's see, this is the on-child added impulse. So when a new child is added to the box, it provides it and sends an impulse too. So we can see, oh, there's the sphere because it was added. Now, if I take the sphere and move it out, then the on-child removed impulse gets sent, and we can see, oh hey, that is the slot that is now no longer underneath the box, in this case. We do have a question from Cthulhu992. So many things to learn. I'm just a beginner, a bit confused, but I don't know where to learn the basics. Do you have any advice? Yes, there are plenty of places, plenty of knowledge resources for learning these kinds of things. One is the other streams that we have here on the workshop, which you can also find in one of the panels here in World. You can also find them on our YouTube channel. And you can also, I definitely also recommend Probable Prime's tutorial series. He has over 200 videos on all sorts of different aspects of Neos and the various technical things inside of it, as well as other content creators as well, like Business Lawyer and Fruxius. Alright. Let's see. Next, we have, how do you use the find child by name node, or any of those find something by whatever nodes? Well, we have a slot, which in this case is this one. And let's say I want to find this slot underneath it. Let's say I know where this is, but maybe I don't know where this slot could be. It could be anywhere underneath this hierarchy, and I want to find it. Well, here I can search for the name of it, but you'll see I don't retrieve it. That's because our search depth is too shallow. In this case, a search depth of 0, it takes our slot and searches the immediate children and only the immediate children. So it's like, oh, is this one the one that we're looking for? No. Is this one the one that we're looking for? No. So it doesn't find it. So we have to look one level deeper, so we're searching the children of these children, and if we go here, I change the search depth up by 1, we find our slot. While we're here, we also have a question from Dwagimorph. Does this work with snappers as well? I presume you are talking about slot children events, and if so, yes. When a snapped item gets snapped under its appropriate snap target, that counts as a child being added to the slot, so you can get information about when something is attached to another or not. Let's see, Caillou Volpes also asks a question about find child by name. I'm guessing the further the depth, the less performant it is. I would say generally yes. So only search as deep as you need to. Like, you could absolutely, if you were like a madman, you could put in the root slot on the top and have a search depth of, I don't know, 256. Your performance would tank, but you would find your slot. I don't recommend doing that. I always recommend for this using a slot that you know the hierarchy of, generally, and the search depth that you know. This is useful if you have this is generally useful if you have a hierarchy where you know what's inside it, but things can still generally kind of move around a little bit, and you want to find it. A good example of this, actually, is on your left or right anchors, like the tooltip anchor, for example. The tooltip anchor slot itself, by default, has nothing under it, but when you get into the avatar, it dynamically generates your tooltip, and this is also where the tooltips you equip are located, is underneath the anchor in this case. So you say you wanted to find the laser, then you could put in the tooltip anchor here, and you could search for laser, and it would find it. Okay, moving on. We have, well, what's the local user? Right now, if you look at this, since Wraith is currently the one who's hosting the stream, this says user Wraith. But for me, it says user Ryuvi. And if I pulse this, say I want to write the value of this to here, I pulse that, it says user Ryuvi. But if Aegis pulses this, it says user Aegis Wolf, because for Aegis, and for everyone here individually, the local user is themselves. And there's user Wraith. This is quite useful for a lot of things, especially if you need something to be different between users. You can also check, say you have something attached to your head or something like that, and you want it to be visible to everyone else except for you. You can check local user, and we can check, for instance, let's say it's something attached to you, then you would check the active user, and you would compare these. Or you can just use, and I didn't know about this for a long time personally, is local user. So what these do is it checks if the user who is currently active on whatever it is, if they're the local user, that's true. But for everyone else, that's false. And that's a method to doing something like that. That's how I have certain things on my avatar and on my tool. Like, for instance, my tool makes sounds when I'm moving these nodes around, but I have that only audible to myself using those two nodes. Next, we have, what is the difference between the local user slot and the local user space? Well, the local user slot is the main root slot that contains and is essentially a user. If I look at myself, for example, I go up a bit, then these slots here where it says user Wraith, user Ryuvi, blah blah blah, these contain you, your user, essentially, including your avatar. And this slot here is the user slot, the local user slot. The reason it's local is because this is my user slot for me, it's Wraith's user slot for Wraith, just like the local user node over there, except for a different aspect of the user. Similarly, we have the local user space, which in this case is the parent slot of the user slot. So if I look at myself one more time here, and I see here's my user slot, if I go to its parent, that is the spawn area, and conveniently, we see that here. This is useful if you're using vector transformations and other things to position something relative to a user, relative to what they're attached to in this case, because sometimes you might need that for linear interpolations and other things. Local user space can help you. Next, we have getting a user from a username and telling us the difference between if the user is present in their headset, or in the world, or both. Right now we're looking at Aegis, and he is quite obviously present in the world. Hello! Now, if Aegis were to go to another world, or completely disconnect, which this needs an updating relay, I just realized. I can talk about those after a minute. We'll see. He is currently not present, because he's spawning. But once he spawns, he is present. Now, it might seem self-explanatory, but it's good to explain these things anyways. Present in headset, or present in world, is if they are currently active in the world. So, of course, like here in Neos, you can be in multiple worlds at once. And you can swap between these worlds, and in all the worlds that you are not present in, you are away, essentially. This is false if you are in a world, but not currently present in the world. Whereas if Aegis were to take off his headset, then present in headset would turn to false. But he's still here, which is why present in world is still true. Another thing to note about the default name tag is a user's name tag turns partly translucent when they're not present in the world. And when he comes back, it becomes like a normal name tag. Good thing to note. Also, welcome back.
There we go. Now my lenses are nice and clean.
Alright, next up, we have an example of the user root, and in this case, the head position node. So once again, we're searching for a user. In this case, I'm searching for myself, and it finds me, of course. From here, I get my user root, which this item it allows you to access things like their head position and various user-related information, specifically about things like controller information, head information, things like that. And as you can see, as I move my head around, that number changes. And if Wraith looks at himself, we can see his head information, and etc. Now, say you wanted to, in this specific example, say you wanted something to be positioned to be not parented to a user for whatever reason, but positioned at their head position, you can use the local user or local user root to get everyone's head position individually, locally for themselves. So for me, if I placed a sphere at my head using this method, I would see the sphere on my head, but for everyone else, they would also see that sphere, for example, around their own heads. This has a specific use in, say you are using a sky and you want to have some kind of an overlay on the sky that can move. Say, maybe it's a moon or it's clouds that can scroll, but you don't want to have an absolutely huge circle or a huge sphere around you that can potentially get a little bit unwieldy. Instead, what you can do is you can use this node to have a large sphere, but it follows the user, and because of that, there's no parallax, or if I move, then the distant landscape kind of moves a little bit, giving you depth. Whereas with this, since it follows the user, you don't see that, and it feels like it's infinitely far away. Fun trick.
There is
Okay.
Hmm?
We do have a question from Rampa on our previous nodes here. Was present and headset tied to anything on the screen? I feel there is activity timer or something. In terms of desktop mode, I think the present and headset node, I'm not entirely sure myself, but I think it deals with if the program is currently in focus or not. But do correct me if I'm wrong. You were going to say something, Aegis?
Another thing about this, there is a component for that particular thing where you can get the position at user. You can change which slot it is, and also make it so it not only positions but also moves with the rotation as well too.
Great thing to bring up. This is just essentially the Logic's equivalent of that.
Oh, I lost my tool when I left the world.
Yes, you did. And finally, for our more theoretical examples here, we have what is the difference between user joined, user spawned, and user left. Well, I'm going to want to ask Aegis if you could respawn for me. And when he does, you'll see we got a pulse here from user spawn, but we did not get a pulse from user joined. That's because the user joined node only fires a pulse when a user first joins the session, when they connect. Whereas a user spawn is every time that a user respawns in the session, aka their user root was destroyed and the host recreates them. Similarly, user left only fires when as a user is leaving the session, and provided here is an impulse of the event as well as the user in question. The reason I'm writing these immediately is because just like all other nodes who have outputs alongside an impulse on the output side of a node, this information is only in existence for the duration of this pulse. So you either have to use it right away or store it for later use, as we can see here. Okay. Aegis, you had some examples. Would you like to cover them?
First off, we have the position at user. So, to showcase where this is, it is located under transform, drivers, and position at user. And basically what this does, this positions the object root that you have to the user in question. You can even also target at local user, although you won't be able to see anything until I get a mirror in this case.
Where's the mirror?
That's a good question.
Oh, you clicked the... I guess the portal works.
Oh, there's the mirror. That's weird. Yeah, I have a sphere now permanently stuck in my head, but you can imagine, say, this is like really, really large and it has like a texture of stars or like planets or clouds, as Ray was talking about, and it would, I think I have an example of that somewhere in my inventory, but I'm gonna remove that. Now I can breathe. So, going back to the topic as well of slot children events as well, there is the parent object or child object, child parent audio clip player. Yes, I can English. This basically makes it so that you can play an audio clip when you take a child object out of a snapper and put it back in. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a snapper, it could be really anything. And I can select the parent under. And basically what that does, it parents the audio clip player under there. And how
You
to
also see
find
it
this?
it creates those slots as non-persistent because you don't want those to save with the item.
Mm-hmm. Also, do not put the parrot under the same place you're checking the parent audio clip player. Otherwise, it'll go into a infinite feedback loop. Because every time it's creating a slot, it's another child object of this root, and it, yeah,
Ah, yes, infinite loop.
yes. So, in order to find this, it's not where you'd think. It's not under audio. It's actually under media, child parent audio clip player. That's where you'd find it. Very similar options you would get on a audio clip player, random audio clip player as well too. So it's good to know where that is as well. Now to go more in depth into how to manage slots and such. This is something that Ryuv and I were working on when we were constructing the Sojourner Island map. And it's a way that we use a route that we organize all the different assets in the world and kind of replace them if we update each asset. And it basically finds the child object that we name specifically, and then we can even change the name of the slot of the new thing that we're adding to kind of like version it in a way. And it takes the slot that we want to use as a template and basically takes that template and replace every single object in that place with that new version of the object. And you can just copy the existing transforms, like where is it positioned, how big or small it is with the scale, and what angle it's rotated as well. And of course, destroying the old one in the process. Now, another example that I've probably brought in multiple times is these random generation or procedural generated object makers. In this case, this creates bismuth crystals. What it does, it takes... Actually, I can open up the logics. I forgot about that. It's the open close. There we go. So if I unpack this, it's overlaying the other one. I can just move this over. There we go. So in this case, it's getting the child object. I made like a whole set of different pieces to kind of kit bash together. And it takes a random version of it in a multiplexer, and it duplicates it, sets the parent of that to a root that I'm going to basically put it all together. And then after that, I set its transform to a randomized set. And then I eventually bake it together and change the parent of that baked slot, because you can take the baked slot and use it as like an input as well. And I take that and I put it in the root, so it's able to be moved around and, you know, used. So it's that. I am going to pack that back up so it's not in the way. And I don't believe I've showcased this either at all, but it's a device that also duplicates objects, but instead of duplicating them in a defined space, it's more or less kind of like a brush or a gun that spawns out objects as you point at a surface with a raycaster. It basically is doing the same thing, but it places the object on the surfaces it shoots at. And each
Very
time
cool.
you can send like a animation in each object as well too, like sending a dynamic impulse. And I can just swap these around for another one and just make crystals grow.
Yes, make crystals grow out of your logics.
Yes. And this is the logics for that tool as well too. Where it takes the position of where it hits and it writes it into float values that you use to set its position of each duplicated slot. This still is kind of a work in progress where still gotta make it so that you can like bake these together in like a chunk, and then you can use that as like to create worlds, for example, decorations or whatnot. So I always thought it would be pretty neat having a easy and simple way of growing crystals in a way for like a cave or fantasy environment as well.
One thing to note about the nodes that we've covered today is that slots and users make up a majority of, or they consist, they're a part of a majority of projects that deal with moving things around, transforming things, duplicating items, creating things, destroying things, etc. Essentially, if you want to do anything with objects in the world or anything with the users in your session or in the world or whatever, these nodes come very much in handy. I believe that is what we have for examples here today.
There is much more, and a lot of the ones that we've shown already throughout the different Workshop Wednesdays also have a lot of these nodes, whether it be vehicles, tools, anchors, like user avatar settings and all that. A lot of
pretty
that
much
you'll
everywhere.
see a lot of, actually even my multi-tool has it too.
Well, we do have a few minutes left in the stream, so now I think is a good time to ask questions about slots, about users, about anything that we've covered today, and etc. Desk time. Hello.
There we go.
I will say that essentially everything I've ever made, most things I've ever made with Logix so far have used these nodes. They're pretty unanimously used, I would say.
I was going to say they are heavily used slots, most definitely.
Ooh, another good example of like one of the nodes used here is the local user space that I've used recently for making projectiles for like a weapon. Like instead of using raycast, it's actually a moving object that goes from the object and bounces off of like surfaces and such.
Yeah.
I ran into an issue whenever a user is parented under a different root. Say if they're not under the root slot, they're parented under, say, a spawn root, because in the spawn area component, you can make it so that users will spawn under that root of the spawn area. And because sometimes if the root is offset from the actual like rotation or position of the root, the projectiles won't match it. So I managed to use local user space, and it basically would compensate for it.
Well, it's on my mind as well. I'm just going to say thank you, Zorol. What is it? Is that Zorol the Pirate for the tier 1? Tom, thank you as well for that tier 1 sub. And thank you to the new followers as well. Really appreciated.
New folks is always good.
Yes. But yeah.
With more people we can teach.
Definitely. I do like what Dragimorph came out with earlier. They said, this is such an information dump. I'm going to have to rewatch this VOD a few times. Yeah, the workshop is quite an information dump. We do go over quite a lot, so, we always advise, yes, go watch the VODs.
Yes, or after today, you can view it on YouTube as well.
Yes. And as I say, all the content from Workshop Wednesdays is hosted on the YouTube channel of Fruxius, so you can just search for Fruxius on YouTube and you'll find a Workshop Wednesdays playlist on Fruxius's channel.
Mm-hmm. If we remember to update it, it's also in a list in the world itself here.
Yeah, I need to... this world needs updating anyway. We keep forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
So... But yeah, as usual as well, we will open the world up for about half an hour to an hour once we've finished, so you can come hang out with us, ask us questions, show us whatever.
Mm-hmm. Come ask questions.
Yeah.
Come say hi.
Yeah, I watch quite a lot of Prime's videos actually, quite often. I will look over Prime's videos when I'm not sure on something. Or there has actually been instances where even I've watched back over the workshop and gone, how was that done?
I've done the same, I'll be honest.
Yeah. What was that component we were speaking about again that I don't remember? Oh yeah, it was that one.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a few instances where something's been done on the workshop and I've gone, how did we do that again?
See, this is why we record these, so that we can access them later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, thankfully, I have them all stored locally on my hard drive, so it's not too bad for me.
Oh, well, easy access.
Yeah.
Finding components is definitely, in a way, a memory game. It's a lot like the Logix node panel as well. You just kind of have to memorize where things are, because we don't have search yet. Same thing with component, and it's...
There are some community tools for searching logics and components.
Mm-hmm.
I
Couldn't
mean,
tell you where they are, but they exist.
I could tell you where one of them is, and that is in Gillifix's public folder. Which is... let me go into public folders here. Where are we? Gillifix Public. Tools. Logix Comp. And we have this. If it when it spawns.
Eventually.
We have this little searcher. And then we can search for certain things. What we'll do is we'll put this on the table here. And I'll go to my POV. And we'll go into my smooth point of view. And what I could do here, just an example, is I want the grab component. And it'll show me all the different types of component that have got the word grab in them. And if I hover over it and click on them, it tells me where they are. So, like, it's in transform interaction. Where's grabbable reparent block? Transform tagging. Where's the grabber? Uncategorized. So that's just a handy tool from Gillifix's folder. That's definitely a good one. And then, as I say, you can also search for Logix nodes. So, I don't know. I need... a parser. Does help if I can spell parse. Oh my god. So I want parse. And it shows me where all the parses are, and as I click on them, it shows me what folder I expect to find them in. Logix operators parsing.
Very nice.
Yeah, I do believe Euclop also has a searcher as well in his public folder. But the one from Gillifix is the main one that I know, so that's the one I've been using since I joined Neos.
We now have an invisible Frooks with us.
Oh, now Frooks is back.
Frooks.
Yeah, I made Frooks invisible for a moment. Because he was actually stood on the table.
AFK.
Away.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is my favourite tool.
Ah,
Bring me back. Hello.
Yeah, by far still the most useful tool. The camera exclusion tip.
Our table. It's broken.
our table was.
Who made...
She hit the ceiling.
I don't know. No, I hit the thing behind us. The ceiling won't even matter. That component logic browser thing that I was using was made by GillFX. So, yeah.
I'm sure the public folder is available somewhere.
Yeah, what I'll do is I will just spawn out the public folder just for the benefit of chat and stream. So you can see how the name is spelt.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. That's where I found the component searcher. That's whose public folder it is. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you. But yeah, you could just search Redex for it. As I say, if you want to search on something like that, what it is called is it is literally called Logix Node Browser v1.2. Hello, Dark Fury VR.
Good to know.
Or Dark Fury, should I
Hello.
say, not Furry, it's Fury. Hey, Big Red. What's that? Given the camera exclusion tip flashes the hierarchy, that seems fun to see it hit me when I have a whole room on my avatar, yes.
Yes.
I know this isn't something for your guys' streams today, but are you guys gonna go over components like inventory link? Yes. Eventually we will. The problem is, I think inventory link comes under uncategorized.
Yeah, that's and uncategorized is huge.
Uncategorized is like a year's worth of project. That's like a year of workshop.
Yes.
You see, I blame him.
Eventually.
I blame the yellow dog man.
Football.
But yeah, we will go over stuff like inventory link. There's definitely something I do. There is one amazing component on the note of inventory items that I do want to go over, and that is inventory thumbnail item source.
Yes.
I love that one so much.
It's very useful.
Yeah.
Underused. Severely underused.
Yeah, very much severely underused is, as I say, inventory item links. Inventory thumbnail item source or something like that.
There you go.
Yeah, more people need to use that one. Oh, you like our clock ramper? We made that, remember? While Ryuvi was away. Any favourite custom inspectors? Definitely not a new user thing, but I was hoping to do some inspector hopping.
Item texture thumbnail source.
Yeah. Yeah, there is actually a thing that you can use to make... No, you still need to use a picture, but you take, say, a photo of the item, and then you use that as the thumbnail in the inventory for that item.
Mm-hmm.
As for custom inspectors, I don't have one. I just use the default.
Same.
Same.
So there you go.
I'm old school.
Ah,
I have my own multi-tool, so
yeah.
there's that.
I mean, I did for a brief period have... Well, it was still a standard inspector. It was just black. With the Sidetracks logo on the back, but I don't have that at the moment. I need to set that back up again. It's a case of being bothered. I like using OpenIDE from Open Multitool. Well, that's, as I say, if you want to, you know, nobody says, you know, what's the best inspector. Nobody says, you know, this is good, this is good. You know, you use what you use because you like it.
Use whatever suits you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why we tend to use default inspectors on the workshop and a lot of default stuff is that way it's just more standardized.
Good for new users.
Yeah, good for new users, yes. It does get confusing.
It does.
Yeah.
But that's why we're here.
Ah! Ah! This world has grab on it.
Oh. Bye, Wraith.
That will have to be changed.
Yes. Alright, well, it is 5 p.m.
2300 UTC.
Hmm.
So yeah, you know what that means, guys. That is the end of the workshop. We'll be back
Aw.
in about 2 weeks. Don't know what we're doing.
We're gonna figure that out.
We'll figure that out. We're going to build a yellow dog man.
We already have one.
We're going to make a new one.
Oh,
What?
Fruits 2.
Fruits 2.0.
The sequel.
Yes. Actually, I don't know what we'll do. We'll figure something out as usual. I mean, have any of you got any ideas?
If you do, submit them to the feedback form, which is available on our Discord server.
Yeah, definitely. Or if you've got an idea right now, post it in chat. You've got a very little bit of time to get an idea in.
Just a bit. Just a few seconds.
Anyway, woohoo! I'd like to say thanks again to... I want to learn more about sound components, obscure components. We could do sound.
We could cover logics and components with
Sound and
involving sound.
There we go, sound and logics
Audio.
components. We're going to do audio in 2 weeks. There we go.
Great. Good thing to know.
So there you go, there's your topic for 2 weeks. We're doing audio.
Yay.
But yeah, thanks all for watching. Thanks to Aegis and Ryuvi again for, you know, covering these topics. Without them, the workshop would be pretty much nothing. Thanks to the bubble machine down there for creating the platform. And we are going to head off now, so we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
See you.
Oh.